slightly off on a little tangent, but I mean, we spoke
Mm.
about why, people taking needing to go to their GP, and that's important to take medications safely. But why do you think so many musicians use beta blockers? What's the underlying things that are coming out in your studies that's perhaps causing
Mm.
this? That's, I think, the big question.
Okay. Yeah. So far, um, from the interviews, we're seeing, okay, there are two key things. There are internal pressures. This is what I'm calling them at this point, but that might change. Internal pressures, and there are systemic pressures. And those pressures start in childhood for a lot of people. So it might be an internal pressure to do better. You want to practice and you want to do better. And so that's just, there's an internal drive that musicians have, obviously, or you're never going to reach that professional level. Um, there are pressures from parents often, to win the scholarships and to contribute to the cost of lessons. And, this what's the word? Well, anyway, there's pressure. Yeah, there can
Yeah, yeah,
can be
yeah.
pressure to do the thing. So,
Yep.
as a child, you've already got these sort of pressures on you. Um, then what I've heard so far from 50% of the people who I've done interviews with is that there's a lot of late diagnosed neurodivergence, which may or may not be that. Again, that's a whole other study that's contributing to that um, capacity and ability to hyper focus and sit in a conference room, sit in a practice room for 6 hours a day,
Yeah.
hyper focusing on your one special interest.
Yeah. And we had one
That sounds.
comment actually from a former colleague of mine, or current colleague as well. He was talking about neurodivergence and performance anxiety as well. And Alison's got her hand up as well. I think there's another. I said to him as well, there's a PhD in that.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
If you could do it, it's really hard to sort of prove a negative. Like you can't just go up to people and say, "Do you think you might be undiagnosed?" It's like,
yeah.
dude. Um,
Well, I mean, most
but
musicians are a
I'm
bit weird
one of them.
anyway, and I'm just like embracing our weird, so it's
Probably,
fine.
it's probably fine. Yeah. So there's those pressures, and we can come back to the neurodivergence thing because that's a whole separate issue. So let's come back to that later. Then you get peer pressures, there's competition, right? And it is a lot of competition. Then you get peer pressures when you get into orchestras as well. Each orchestra has its own culture. Each instrument group has a specific kind of culture. Um, we had one person who I really love this quote is you win the trial at the audition, but you win the job at the pub. So if that
Okay.
person wasn't keeping up with the head of that section by
Yeah.
drinking 5 pints at at
Yeah.
the pub in the interval,
Mm.
they weren't going to keep the job,
Yeah.
which is just awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are all those sorts of pressures that happen in orchestras as well. You get pressures from teachers. You either have the old school teachers who don't believe that performance anxiety even exists.
Mm.
And then you get the ones that, and we've had a few people contribute in who've said, oh, yeah, my teacher introduced me to beta blockers when I was 16.
Mm.
Um, then you get hiring practices. So the pressure of hiring practices and job market pressures. So again, for casuals, it can be really, really stressful. Or there are even orchestras who will hire casuals to lead sections,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, interesting. That's a whole other PhD on its own. Um, so you've got that. Um, and we've got people in leadership positions in orchestras. So essentially, the leaders of the sections are like middle management,
Mm.
and nobody's ever trained a musician to be a middle manager.
Mm.
So there's lack of training into like how do you manage the emotions of all the people that you have in your team? Because that's a huge job on its own.
Mm.
You've
I
got
see that. I see
conductor
that one
pressures
as
for a
well.
lot of
Like that's definitely a big thing as well because you get
Mm.
so many like they're great at playing their instrument, and then they're told to lead
Mm,
someone, and they've never had that sort of training. And I mean, quite often in other industries as well, you rise and rise, and then you have to lead people, and it's like, well, I know how to do the job, but I don't know how to lead people. That's a different skill
yeah,
set. So
managing people, that's hard.
yeah.
Um, then you've got conductor pressures in some orchestras, obviously not all. Some orchestras, you're going to get conductors who can make or break people in the orchestra,
Mm,
and that still happens. So you've got that. Um, the big one for me, and this is really, really interesting, that over the past 10 to 15 years, the industry has changed drastically.
mm,
Like when I was at the TSO, a million years ago, back in the Stone Age, um, I'd go to rehearsals. You'd have a few rehearsals and then you'd have a few concerts,
mm,
right? That was it. Then you go home, have a few days off. Lovely.
mm.
These days, you have to schmooze with benefactors, which is not a bad thing, but it's an added pressure. You have to um, you have to provide, your top 10 Spotify list for the socials. And can we just get some pictures of you for the, and can we just do the video for the socials? And then you're going from, a big Mahler concert to the community level sort of Star Wars themes. And it's just constant performing. Your rehearsals are recorded. You have live rehearsals in front of an audience. You have live rehearsals that are going online. The level of performance today in orchestras in Australia, and I'm going to make a gross assumption that it's happening everywhere, but from what we know from people we've interviewed so far, that this is a completely different industry to the one that I was part of, 30
Mm.
years ago. So the performance pressures alone have just multiplied and multiplied over the past 15 years because of
Yeah.
the advent of social media.
Yeah, that's
That's,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
I definitely
Um,
find as well with us
yeah.
with the TSO, we record our dress rehearsals. We have to get dressed up as well, and then we do the concerts. And yeah, for patching and all that sort of stuff. And
Mm.
after conversations with my colleagues, it feels like you kind of do two concerts in a day.
Yeah.
And
Well, you do.
yeah, and so it's
You do.
just putting on your suit and all that sort of stuff. And last week we had a Mahler concert, so you're playing a Mahler symphony twice in a day. It's pretty
Oh my
stressful,
God.
so it's not the
And
easiest. But
exhausting.
yeah,
Bloody hell.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, these are all the pressures that we're seeing, and we're seeing it repeated so far. So it would be really nice to get more people just to get a bit more detail and see if we can either focus that a bit more or even broaden it out and see what else is out there. Um, yeah. So huge pressures that we're seeing on people, and it's for those reasons partly, and I think the potentially undiagnosed and or late diagnosed neurodivergence that those pressures result in physiological responses that have to be managed.
Mm,
And the easiest way for a lot of people to do that is to take beta blockers.
Medicaid. Yeah.
And people take beta blockers in classical music because it's just an acceptable part of the culture. Like each type of music, like jazz musicians and rock musicians, and we're all taking different drugs, but we're all taking drugs.
Yeah, yeah.